Chapter 22. The Castle of the Entrapment of the Saints. We heard a whoosh, and another wormhole opened in front of us. We stepped in and were siphoned up. It dropped us on the ground in front of an ominous gray castle, completely revived and arrayed for battle we were. Nothing stirred. The castle seemed deserted. The huge metal door had no doorknob, no seams, no knocker, no window, nothing. It was red, the only color we could see anywhere. This time, we didn't knock. We were not going to be guests here. We hid the horses and headed on foot around the side through a gate covered in dead vines. We walked the length of the side of the castle, which stretched for at least a mile. A high stone archway rose along the entire back of the castle, its ceiling matted in old, dead vines. It stretched for at least a mile and was very dark and smelled of mildew. The back of the castle was lined with little barred windows, too dirty to see into. We felt movement but could not see anything. Something wasn't right. We paused and waited. I looked up. Thousands of bat-like demons covered the archway ceiling and hung from the dead vines. Apparently, we had awakened them. They started diving at us immediately as we grabbed our weapons. They were slow, as if they had not had any activity for a very long time. They had strange features, human-like hands under their wings and bird legs with very long, dull claws. They had men's faces with pointed beards, red eyes, and two sharp fangs protruding from the bottom of their mouths. They made no sound. Even when they died, only the flapping of wings could be heard. They seemed lazy, and we realized they were not really even fighting. We could hold up our swords and they would dive right into them, skewering themselves. We heard noises and shouts from the opposite end of the archway. Out of the distance came our other captains and their wives and armies. They had arrived at the other end of the castle and made their way to us, killing the bats as they moved forward. There were solemn hellos, handshakes, and a few hugs as we met in the middle. Several of us looked in the windows. When our eyes finally adjusted to the grayness beyond the filmy glass, we saw what looked like tiny, isolated cells. A lone figure sat motionless on a bench in every cell. Each cell and person was nearly identical. We must go in and see if we can talk to these people. We need to know what we are up against, Cameron said. I have a feeling we are not up against anything at the moment, I said. We now stood in front of another huge door, just like the one we had seen in the front of the castle. Cameron spoke. She's right. The bat demons were sluggish, and these people look like they are in a catatonic state. Let's split up and scope out the entire castle, and then meet back here to form a plan. We could be stepping into a trap. Be very quiet and use wisdom. Do not start fighting unless it is necessary. I suspect this castle is quite larger than we are aware of. Cameron and the captains quickly formed a strategy for scanning the enormous fortress, and we all went our separate ways. Cameron and I were to make our way to the very top with our team. We tried to fly, but we couldn't. It felt as if webs of invisible strings that we could not get through permeated the air. Our soldiers were still very young and had not yet received their flight power. We wound our way up a corner stairwell and began our march to the top with the soldiers. It took us 3 hours to reach the top floor. We assessed that we had probably climbed 4 miles high at this point. Cameron stopped us and pointed up. The ceiling looked like dirt and roots. A loud thumping was causing clods of it to fall. There were holes in the soil roof at intervals, which seemed easy to get in and out of. Roots again, I said. I don't think they are the same kind, Cameron remarked. He walked under a very large hole. Someone hoist me up. 2 of our men helped him up into the hole, just enough to poke his head through. We stood very still while he looked around. Down, down, he whispered hastily. He had seen very large grasshopper-like creatures guarding the rooftop. He said it was like an entire mountain was growing on the roof of the castle, occupied by these huge grasshoppers. They had piercing, intelligent eyes, but they seemed bored and restless. "They don't know we're here," Cameron said. "We must have been protected from their vision by the wormholes," one of our soldiers realized. "Or they haven't had to worry over visitors in a very long time. Hoist me up again. Careful." Cameron took more time to look around, then motioned to be let back down. He described a huge cave inside the mountain. He saw a cage in the distance with a man in it. This man was more lucid, unlike the others in the cells. He did not appear to have been there very long. "It is still daylight," he whispered. "Let us meet with the others, and then we will make a plan, which we will carry out after dark." We made our way down the stairs and arrived back under the arch within 2 hours. The others were waiting. Each captain brought the same report and description. The castle was a perfect square, measuring a mile on each side and reaching up to 4 miles high, not including the massive mountain on top. We determined that there were identical stone stairways in each of the 4 corners and 2 sets in between at measured intervals, totaling 12 stone stairways. We could not even begin to count the floors of cells. There were thousands and thousands of cells on each level, and every cell held a stationary figure sitting on a bench like a statue. No guards had been seen, only the sluggish bats at the bottom and the bored grasshoppers at the top. Cameron whistled for Jade, and we sent a soldier to fly up on him and assess the height of the mountaintop. Apparently, the air did not affect Jade's flying. He reported that it reached up into the clouds for what seemed to be several miles. Giant grasshoppers came and went, flying in and out of the peak. They still had not noticed our presence. Cameron spoke. "I believe the man in the cage at the top is a very important piece of this puzzle. We must first free him and question him. It seems too easy, and I have the impression he will know what it is we are up against. I will take 20 soldiers to the top. We will release this man and bring him down, and then we will convene to form another plan to release the catatonic prisoners." We rested in the forest, and just after dark, Cameron and I, along with 18 others, set out into the castle and up the stairwell. This time, Cameron went off alone to pray before we started the climb. He received a beautiful song, which he sang in an ancient language. Morge mage malakutem niamaz halamarok chandruzi gavasi saktant asbadanam. He sang this several times, and suddenly we were all translated to the top of the tower. It was a transporter song. We joined together in prayer one last time, and then each positioned under a hole in the rooted dirt ceiling. On Cameron's signal, we went up. At first, there were no giant grasshoppers in sight, and we could see that the man in the cage was asleep. We found the grasshoppers asleep in what looked like little cave holes all along the inside of the mountain walls. From what we could tell, there were over 100 of them. We spread out to take our positions, hoping they would not awaken because we were completely outnumbered. As we guarded these sleeping giants, Cameron went over to the man in the cage and woke him up with a poke of his sword. Startled, the man whispered, frightened, "Who are you?" "My name is Cameron Uriah. I'm here to help the people in this castle. Why are you being held captive?" "Oh, thank God. My name is Harold Breitner. I'm an inventor. They have hidden my newest invention somewhere in this God-forsaken place. I call it the Eye-Gate box. With it, you can see all the enemy webs, ley lines, and lies that are invisible to the human eye. This castle is full of those webs. The box is a great weapon in the hands of the chosen warriors. I have heard of you. Your name is honored among men. We must find the box." "That explains why we couldn't fly," Cameron said to himself. "What?" Harold asked. "Never mind. We must get you out of this cage." Cameron went to work, opening the lock as quietly as possible. It wasn't very hard. It seemed the demons were not really worried about Harold getting in or out. No one had been here in decades or even longer. Do you have any idea as to where they may have put the box? The top commander of these creatures is easily recognizable. He is much larger than the others, with the same body, but a human face, much like the bats that guard the arch. I am sure you encountered those lazy creatures. He keeps the box in his cave close to the very top. It is at least a mile up from here, Harold said. Cameron signaled for us to drop back down through the holes. We met under the dirt roof and introduced ourselves to Harold, then made our descent back down into the arch. Cameron whistled for Jade and looked at me. We will fly on the horses up to the top of the mountain and go through that way to retrieve the box. I will take the captains and wives. The rest of you stay. We will send Jade back down if we need you. Jade and Spirit and the other flying horses arrived, and we mounted and sailed up to the top. Harold rode behind me. At the top of the mountain, one couple stayed to stand guard at the entrance, while Cameron and the rest of us quietly went ahead to look for the commander. I watched his back, keeping a short distance. The others panned out around us, staying quiet so as not to wake the demon insects. Suddenly I was caught in a sticky embrace. I looked up to see I was being wrapped in a giant grasshopper tongue. The two guards came down from their post and the battle was on. As the grasshopper tongues were lashing out at lightning speed, we heard an eerie drone all around us. "What is that horrible sound?" I screamed. Harold, whose leg was wrapped in a long black tongue, screamed back, "It is their only other weapons, reasoning and logic. They are beginning to invade our minds. Try not to listen. Think of something that you love." As he was saying this, I threw him my pearl-handled knife, and he began hacking tongues as fast as he could. I pictured our mountain home, the lambs, and Jesus standing out on the beautiful singing grass, laughing and rolling with us. The drone subsided a bit. I slashed with all my might at uncurling tongues, cutting my way behind Cameron as he advanced forward into the mountaintop. We were holding them off when we heard a menacing voice. "Well, well, well, look who came to visit. Thank you so much for dropping in. We do not get a lot of visitors in this old ruined fortification." Cameron halted Jade and looked around to find where the voice was coming from. "Ah, you are close, my weak little prince. I am here." Suddenly, two red, flaming eyes broke from a place just above Cameron's head. A huge, flaming tongue whipped out towards his legs. "Watch out!" I shouted. "I have tongues of fire just as your precious lord does. Mine are a bit more convincing, however, don't you think? Would you like to have a chance to speak in my tongues? Ah, it will give you everything you could ever have imagined and more. Think of it. Think. Cameron, remember your own words. Don't think with your mind. Think with your heart. Think of your Lord. Think of your home. Think of my love," I shouted over the growing drones in my own mind. Cameron closed his eyes as the fiery tongue closed around Jade's legs. Jade stood still, not giving in to the fear. Cameron began to sing a soft melody. As he sang, the song grew and manifested around his body, and the tongue withdrew. The song began to take on a life of its own, singing itself into a whirlwind that soon became a funnel. As it gained momentum, lightning and colors flashed in and around it. At this point, another sound rose up from the demon grasshoppers like a whining engine that was about to die. We all watched as the funnel began to suck in the tangible droning sound like a great vacuum until suddenly the droning stopped. The grasshopper tongues began to lose power as the three of us joined in the melody. Harold was mesmerized by this miracle of sound, and then he caught on and began to sing as well. As we sang, we heard a swish as the great commander rushed down and stood at a distance in front of Cameron. We sang on. The rest of the grasshoppers were mute from our song, biting and chewing on their own tongues in agony from our supernatural refrain. We could hear them trying to murmur and then pushing hard to get into our thoughts, but the song held them off. It did not seem to affect the commander. He invaded our thoughts, and we heard his voice clearly. "Your silly song cannot stop me. Come, let me give you the real song, The song from the tree." His voice was enticing. "You know, the one in the garden, the song that can give you everything. Come, think on this. Listen to my song. I am the song of songs who sang with the morning stars in the beginning. This is the song you want to learn from. This tune will give you the world. It will give you fire eternal. This is the hymn of all ages, the song of all knowing." We sang on to block his thoughts cutting into our minds. Then I had an idea. I nodded to Cameron quickly, and he knew what to do. I moved forward on spirit with Shadow on my lap. I shouted loudly above his mind game, "I will learn your song. Let me hear it out loud. Open your mouth and sing out, you loathsome creature." "You want it? You got it." His voice slithered through my thoughts. He opened his mouth and let out a sound that nearly caused our eardrums to explode. What have I done? We all clasped our hands over our ears and kept singing our song louder and louder. He sang the most evil sound we had ever heard. The long, flickering flame of his tongue rolled out of his mouth, a giant tongue of hellfire. "Now!" I barely managed to shout. Cameron leapt from Jade straight at the giant's mouth. He hacked with all his might, blinded by the fire. I shouted, "To the left!" Just in time, he reached up and made a final sweep, cutting off the tongue of the mighty prince of the air. His howls and screeches filled the top of the mountain. His great tongue dropped to the ground and simmered out, a charred piece of meat at his own feet. Then he grotesquely morphed into a familiar shape. "You!" I hissed, out of breath. It was the hideous vulture from the desert. "Yet it is I. Yet I am not the end you will see," he said in our thoughts. He could no longer speak. He could only emit a pitiful gurgling of black blood from the corners of his mouth. He let out one long, miserable shriek as he flew, wobbling up and out of the mountain. Then came a vehement swooshing as his followers flew out behind him. "You won't be singing your repulsive song again," I shouted after him. "Shall we go after them?" One of our men spoke up. "No," Cameron said. "Let him go. He is weakened and will fly to his master. That will be for another time. We must get Harold's eye gate box and free the people in the cells." "Cameron, Jade is hurt," I said, and rushed to the horse's side. Jade's fetlocks on his forelegs were burned badly from the demon tongue. We had a soldier fly Jade out to the camp to be cared for. I cried for him as he flew out with his great wings, his forelegs hanging limp. I wiped my eyes and looked up into the place where the great vulture had been sleeping. The hole was very large. "Look, the box must be there." I climbed up the mountain wall and into the hole. As my eyes adjusted, I saw a gold glint. The box was wedged into a cutout in the rock. "I need my knife," I called out. Harold threw it up to me, and I used it to get the box out. I climbed back down and stood in front of him. "Here is your box. What is our next move? Shall we go to the cells and release the prisoners?" I asked. Harold said that was exactly what we had to do, and the box was the key. He went on to explain, "This is one of the oldest fortresses of the enemy. The prisoners have been here long enough to have their thoughts completely taken from them and replaced. The first step is to open the doors of every cell. This will take some time, but even after all the doors are open, the people might not leave. That is why the bats were so slow. Everyone in this place has been here so long, they have forgotten everything else, their families, friends, callings, and purposes. The bats have forgotten they are guarding the prisoners, and the prisoners have forgotten they are in prison. The lies in the minds of the prisoners are so old that they are all they know, and they are content. However," he continued, "we have already started setting them free by muting the grasshoppers' brainwashing techniques. New thoughts are already getting through, but they will be painful to them at first. The box was designed to open the eyes of the prisoners. Once all the doors are open, we can open the box. It will charge the air of the cells from a central location and reveal the web of lies to the prisoners. We need more help. Once they wake up and see what they have been under for all these years, they will be traumatized. We need others to help them adjust to what they will see as they get free. We will call our soldiers, but what will they see? I asked. They will see a lot in a short time. How they started believing the lies in the first place, how it separated them from loved ones, how they became obtuse, and how long they have been this way. Some will adjust easier than others. The ones that adjust quickly will be able to help the ones who are slower. What will we do with them after this? Cameron asked. There are so many. How do we know where to take them? That is the beauty of the box, Harold said. After their eyes open and the trauma subsides, it will send them back to their homes. Harold took a hidden chain from around his neck that held a tiny golden key. The Lord showed me that there would be 3 keys. I have only this small one that opens the box. I do not know where or what the other 2 keys are. I only know they will reveal themselves after the box is open. Cameron closed his eyes and began to sing. Shadow, the captains and wives, and I joined in. Morge barge malakutem niyamaz alamachok Chandruzi gafazi sakton azbadanam morge bage malakutem niyamaz alamachok Chandruzi gafazi sakton azbadanam. Harold's eyes got big as the box began to glow from the song. It lifted up off the ground where it lay at his feet and began to vibrate. The transporter song was a key. This is it, the second key, Harold exclaimed. This song is the key that will send them back to their homes. We will find the other key along the way.